welcome everybody to this webinar where we are going to be talking about COVID-19 policy analysis and response in Thailand. And I will introduce the speakers in a minute. And this program is a joint effort of USAID Innovation Lab called PRCI. We have the director of that program with us, Dr. David Shirley. I would like to introduce him. He's a professor of Michigan State University and also directs this program under which the Asian countries and African countries have come together to work on policy analysis, capacity strengthening, and influencing policy in the regions. With that brief introduction, let me turn it over to Dave, who is the right person to talk about the program. And then I will come back and introduce a little bit of the program as well as the speakers. Dr. Dave Shirley, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Suresh, and good morning to our Southeast Asian colleagues. Good evening to those joining from North America. As Suresh said, I'm David Shirley, Professor of Ag, Food, and Resource Economics at Michigan State University and Director of PRCI. PRCI is the acronym. Again, as Suresh said, for the USAID-funded Feed the Future Innovation Lab. There are many innovation labs that USAID funds. This is the Innovation Lab for Food Security Policy Research, Capacity, and Influence. This is the fourth webinar that PRCI will have put on since we started under our research series, and it's the first webinar in Asia, so we're very pleased about that. So PRCI is all about doing collaborative research with our local partners, research that is deemed to be a priority by those local partners, research that's deemed to be of importance for influencing policy in the countries where we work with our partners. So it's all about building everything on a foundation of research to then do capacity building, both organizational capacity building and technical capacity building. We've had 8 technical capacity training modules so far in Africa, and we just have started. Thank you very much, Suresh and Shinshin Diao of IFPRI, Aura from Gasetsart University, and others who got our first very successful training module done just a few days ago in Asia, and that's the first of what will be several. There are going to be 2 more before the month is out. So that's the C in PRCI capacity building. And finally, this is all done with the purpose of building sustainable capacity for influencing policy and programmatic decision making in these countries. And we could not do it. And in fact, the foundation of what we do is our local partners. So I want to thank TDRI, which has stepped up to organize and present this first webinar, and also Gasetsart University. TDRI and Gasetsart University are key partners in Southeast Asia, and with them as partners, we are reaching out to a whole set of centers across the region. Just getting started on this, I think we've had a great start, and we're really looking forward to how it unfolds over the next 4 years. So I think with that, I will turn it back to Suresh to finish the introduction, and then we'll dig into the fascinating topic that Dr. Nippon will be speaking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dave Shirley. This is a very good introduction. And as Professor David Shirley said, this is the first in the series of webinars we will be giving from Southeast Asia. And we are also connecting with Asian countries as well, in South Asia as well. But this particular seminar is timely because Thailand has proven itself as one of the successful countries in responding effectively to the COVID-19 situation. Although this is a situation at the global level, countries are still struggling to cope up with it in terms of addressing the health issues and the economic issues, and how to protect their population as well as how to protect the economy from going down. Thailand has shown, at least on the policy side, a very good set of responses, and we would like to use that opportunity to present a two-part seminar. Today is the first part, and that we are going to be talking about, we are calling session 1. And the session 2 is coming in September 30th. We'll talk about it by the end of the seminar. But this session, first session, we are going to be looking at Thai's government's policy responses to COVID-19 and the success of health policy. From that perspective, it provides a foundational kind of information about how Thailand has done it, and how do we further, in the second seminar, we can analyze particularly the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 on the economy, particularly agricultural economy. But to do this seminar, both sessions, we have excellent speakers from Thailand Development Research Institute. Let me first introduce Dr. Nippon, and Papang Sakon is the distinguished fellow of TDRI, and he is very well known Thai economist, not only in Thailand, but also throughout Asia. For the past 30 years, he has done excellent work sharing the work of Thailand with other countries in Asia. And we are so fortunate to have it. In fact, it is the initiative of his own initiative to start thinking about this seminar. He is joined today by Urarait. Let me say her last name correctly, Jantara Siri. I'm a little bit used to Sanskrit, so I can handle that. So we are very welcome, the researcher at TDRI as well, working with Dr. Nippon, mentored by him as well. So we want to open up this for the speakers without spending any more time. But we are very proud to have them and start this Asia seminar, webinar series for PRCI. We'll go ahead and start, Dr. Nippon, and with your directions, we'll take the next step. And of course, Jim Monahan is there at Michigan State University for any technical issues. If you are not linking properly, send him an email and we will sort that out. But with that, let me turn it over to the speakers, and we'll come back and take the question and answers in a bit. Thank you. Dr. Nippon, please.
Thank you, Suresh, and thank you, David. This is also part of TDRI capacity building. The reason Ms. Urairat joined is part of the capacity building of our young researchers. Not only Ms. Urairat, but there are a couple of researchers in my program, which we have them involving in the policy tracking and part of our capacity building among the young researchers at TDRI. But let me begin with the presentation because we don't have much time. After my first brief introduction, then we're going to have a poll of 3 questions. Okay. So let me start with the key message first. The key message of my presentation is that Thailand has been placed as one of the top countries that successfully contained the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet the successful health policy has come with a very high economic cost and as well as the social cost. Thailand responded immediately to COVID-19 pandemic with a combination of effective health policies. After its success in flattening a curve of the new infected case, the government has launched other measures to mitigate the impact, such as economic measures and social protection policy. This webinar will qualitatively explain the success of health policy measures and attempt to analyze the institutional factors behind the success. Here is my outline, objective and methodology, and then we have a poll. After the poll, we have a Q&A, short Q&A, and then Ms. Urairat will touch on the timelines of COVID-19 pandemic and policy response, as well as the impact of the policy response. And we'll talk about how did Thailand contain COVID-19. And then towards the end, I'm coming to talk about towards a conceptual explanation of successful health policy and institution. The building up of the health institution is very important for the success of the policy. And then a brief, on next session on September 30. So on the objective, I will briefly describe the TDRI. We will briefly describe TDRI's monitoring of COVID-19 and policy response, and provide a preliminary assessment of the success of health policy. And then in next webinar, we will assess impact of COVID-19 and health as well as lockdown policies on the Thai economy, especially agriculture, because IFPRI and MSU, Michigan State University, are focusing on agriculture and natural resources. So that's why we would like to emphasize the issues of agriculture. Okay, our methodology, we start with a conceptual way of thinking about disease control, and this comes from the expert in health field. And as Hippocratic oath, everyone who will become a medical doctor, they will say, I will prevent disease whenever I can. For prevention is preferable to cure. This is very important for medical doctors. And one necessary condition to an effective disease control policy is to launch the surveillance system as soon as possible. This is one necessary condition. The rationale for the use of strict disease control measures, for example, lockdown, closing some business, work from home, come from a medical doctor in Thailand. In fact, he is a dean of one medical school. He said that if people still go out of their home as usual, and this is his statement on 22nd of March, if people still go out of their home as usual, there will be 350,000 COVID infection cases by 15th of April. 52, almost 53,000 patients in hospital, 17,000 patients in ICU, and 7,000 deaths by 15th of April. So this is his prediction and warning. The Oxford tracking data also shows that successful Asian countries like Singapore and Vietnam have begun to launch the disease control as well as other policy measures, well before the first infected case were identified. These are the information from Oxford tracking program, but we changed the diagram slightly. Instead of on the horizontal is the date of the starting from January rather than the number of cases. So this is, you can see in case of Singapore, they start immediately the health policy as well as Vietnam and Thailand. Okay, anyone who are interested can visit the Oxford tracking program website. Okay, so given that conceptual framework, we monitor COVID-19 situation by using daily data reported by the Department of Disease Control. Department of Disease Control is similar to CDC in the US. Okay, and then we monitor policy response based on IFPRI COVID-19 policy classification using various data sources like the Committee of COVID-19 Situation Administration, CCSA. You will have to be familiar with the CCSA, Committee of COVID-19 Situation Administration, Ministry of Finance, the National Planning Board, National Statistical Office, Ministry of Labor, and from the news. We'll use a qualitative method to assess the effectiveness or efficacy of the policies. The success of the COVID-19 control policy is measured by how do we flatten the daily infection curve, the new infection curve. That's that's the most important variable. And I believe every country has this data on a daily basis. And then the effectiveness of policy measure is evaluated by measuring the degree or percentage of compliance to each policy measure. This is basically the summarize of our methodology. Okay. Then we'll start the poll. Jim, would you please answer the questionnaire by clicking on the participation button? Jim, would you share the screen on the question? Okay, interesting. So face mask is number 1. Okay, number 2 is social distance in public place. And number 3 is lockdown. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, let's go on to the second question, Jim.
I've put the link there. It's the second link.
Yeah.
If hopefully folks have started to answer that. Here, I'm gonna resend it in the chat just to anyone who.
Yeah, people, participants, please go to the chat box and then you will see the links there so that you can answer clicking on the link, you can answer the questions. It's straightforward, but you should know where to click for the chat box. It's at the bottom of your screen. There is this red sign that shows chat, and then there is a number showing. That means there is number of chats that you have not read. Oh, the answers for second is coming up. Dr. Nipan, how do we interpret?
Okay. This is very interesting. We asked about the importance of the factors contributing to the success of government health policy in each country. 17 responses now. 41% said public cooperation with the government. Oh, now it reduced to 38%. But 39% still number 1. Okay. Number 2 is public communication, transparency, and evidence-based. And number 3 is good public health system management. So 3 factors as we expect, but you know, we don't expect the. Okay. So you know, public cooperation with government disease control policy is very important. 18 responses. Thank you. Then we go to the next question, the last one.
And I've added the third link back into the chat again, so look for it there if you missed it.
So with 18 responses, the majority say 56% almost say that the government, their 19 responses, their government, you know, responds very promptly, down to 53%. And 31% say, you know, not promptly, but not too slow. But still interesting, 16% say their government respond too slow.
Yeah.
16%. Yeah. Okay. So is there any question? Suresh, you can moderate.
Okay, so one more thing that I want to emphasize is that you can always post your questions for Dr. Nipan and and on the chat box, and we'll be collecting the questions as we go along. So Dr. Nippon is opening up already for questions. Please go ahead and type it in the chat box. Dr. Nippon, what I would suggest is you start presenting and we will start looking at the questions as they come in.
Good.
So please continue the presentation.
Yes.
Thank you.
We may not have the time to respond to the question at the moment, but the reason we provide this poll is that, this is the way we think about the policy response in Thailand. So let me begin with with the introduction, with the presentation, and Ms. Ulaila will do a presentation. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Ulaila from TDRI. First of all, I would like to talk about timeline of COVID-19 pandemic and policy response in Thailand. For COVID-19 pandemic timeline, the first infected case was found on the 13th of January. It's from a Chinese tourist. At the end of Jan, there was a local transmission to Thai taxi driver. Okay.
Let me share the screen.
Urairat, you can probably come a little bit closer to the mic, yeah?
Okay. 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 And the end of Jan, there were a local transmission to Thai taxi driver. In March, Thailand was in the peak period of infection. There was at least 100 infected cases per day, and the highest infected case was 188 cases on the 22nd of March. This incident causes by the super spreading from boxing stadium and Thong Lo nightclub. Fortunately, Thailand has an effective system to control and prevent this pandemic. So since the 4th of May until the 2nd of September, there were no domestic infection for around 100 days. In summary, the latest information on yesterday, Thailand had a 3,490 accumulated infection case and 58 cases passes away due to COVID-19. And for policy response timeline, the initial pandemic in Thailand since January till March, Thai government mainly focuses on health measures to control COVID-19 pandemic. Until in April, economic measures began to implement for alleviate the impact for business and citizens. The example of health policy measure, Thailand conduct a temperature check at the airport since the 3rd of January before we found the first case, and the testing for COVID-19 was provided for a patient under investigation without charge since 17th of March. And then there were lockdown measures started in Bangkok before applied all over the country. This measure is in the emergency decree enforces on 26th of March, and other measure is in the emergency decree is closing country with some condition to allow some people get into Thailand, such as ambassador, foreigner with a work permit, for example. And after announced emergency decree, Thailand also imposed a state quarantine, curfew, and international flight ban respectively. For example of economic measure, government approved financial aid project named Nobody Will Be Left Behind, granting 15,000 baht for an informal workers affected from losing their job or their income. In addition, government has approved a three-royal decree with 2 trillion baht. This budget will be allocated to reduce the impact of COVID-19. And according to the lockdown measure, the beginning of May, government had eased business lockdown phase by phase. Start with a low risk and necessary business such as a restaurant or pharmacy, and then they expand it to a high risk business like a sport or entertainment venue. The detail of each measure I will describe in the next topic. In this part, I will present the important policy response and its impact by grouping them into a 5 main group conform to an IFPRI policy classification. It includes economic response, social protection, citizen response, health measure, and population movement. Firstly, I would like to talk about the 3 measures in the first row, and for the 2 below measure, I will talk in the next part. Before get into the detail, I would like to explain the overall budget injected to deal with the COVID-19. It was around 90 billion baht, and the government has approved the budget transfer act in order to require the ministry to transfer the budget back into the central government is around 88 billion baht to be a reserve for handle the crisis or emergency incident. And moreover, government has approved the royal decree to authorizing the Ministry of Finance to borrow 1 trillion baht for implementing health measures and rehabilitating economic and social. And this part is talk about the first measure group is economic response, including the fiscal policy and financial and monetary policy. The important fiscal measure is a financial aid scheme named Nobody Will Be Left Behind. The government grants 500 baht for an informal workers for 3 months, as well as 10 million farmers receive the same amount. And moreover, 300 baht cash out were provided to vulnerable groups, including elderly, infants, and disabled. And the economic social rehabilitation project is the one of the important fiscal policy to alleviate the COVID impact on the Thai economy. The total budget is 400 billion baht. The first batch of approved projects mostly related to agricultural sector and rural economy. In the part of financial and monetary policy, Bank of Thailand has established Corporate Bond Stabilization Fund or BSF to ensure sufficient liquidity in financial market. And Bank of Thailand cut the policy rate serially from 1.25% to 0.5% in March and hold this rate until now. Moreover, government and commercial banks have launched financial measures to help SME like a soft loan and debt payment deferment. And the second measure group is social protection. The Social Security Office or SSO under Ministry of Labor increased the benefit for employees who being in a social security system and they be unemployed due to resignation or termination. In addition, SSO had measures to reduce and suspend social insurance payment. Other social protection is the utility support to reduce 3% of electronic and water supply bills for 3 months. And the next is the third major group is a citizen response. For example, the donation of food or necessary consumer product into a Pansuk cabinet initiated by the local people is very popular in many areas in Thailand. This project can help someone who cannot reach the government assistance, and other citizen response, for example, fundraising or disinfection measure initiated by the private sector, such as they provide a temperature check or alcohol hand sanitizer for their customer. And okay, in this part, I would like to talk about how did Thailand contain COVID-19. The success is the result from many health measures and related measures such as a population movement. However, we conclude it into 5 main health measures. Firstly, is this a system? For example, Thailand provides a traveler temperature check at the airport since early of January. we provide a free PCR test for patients under investigation and promoting capability of testing center around Thailand. And this is show the left-hand graph show the increasing of the number of testing center all over the country, and the right-hand side is the graph will show the number of testing center monthly. From the latest information in September, there were 920,000 cases that they get a testing for COVID. It accounts for around 1.3% of Thai population. And moreover, in the contact tracing system, the Ministry of Public Health implemented active tracing in risk area or in the tourism province like Phuket or Pattaya. And they use the network of village health volunteers to reduce the spread of COVID-19 in a rural area. In addition, government has used application named Thai Chana for tracking and tracing people in a public space like a supermarket or restaurant or fitness center. And the second is a health facility and service measure. This measure is about increasing capacity of health system to deal with COVID-19, such as increasing ICU or COVID-19 patient beds, as well as investing in research projects to develop COVID-19 vaccine or research in related issues. The third measure is about hygiene measures, such as face mask wearing or hand washing. These measures were recommended by health agency in early January. This suggestion made a high demand for face mask and alcohol hand sanitizer, and they made this product expensive and shortage. So the government has been banning the export of face mask for a year since the 4th of February. Moreover, government has controlled the price of face mask and alcohol by adding this product into the price control list. And the next is the graph show the result of online survey about citizen compliance with the COVID-19 prevention measure. Most of Thais still aware to comply with the hygiene measure, especially to wear a face mask. The next is about the fourth measure is social distance. This measure related to population movement that is the key factor to reduce the risk of infection. This measure was recommended by the Department of Disease Control since March. For example, they recommend to take a space at least 2 meters from each other. And moreover, there were soft lockdown and business shutdown measures following to the emergency decree. More than 20 business required to shut down temporarily. This business can be categorized into 7 groups. That is sport, entertainment, public space, tourism, religion, transportation, and shopping. However, the government has eased business lockdown phase by phase, as I mentioned above. And in addition, the government announced a curfew measure between 10 p.m. until 4 a.m. started on the 3rd of April and then phasing out gradually and revocation on 15th of June. This measure also have a negative effect on business, especially in transportation business and, for example, morning market, that they need to sell a fresh product, for example. And this pie chart is about a social distancing. Some business allow their staff to work from home. This pie chart shows the percentage of types of work in period of pandemic. The 31% need to work as usual, while 19% work from home every day and 21% work from home some days. And in this graph, we show about the score of business evaluated by their customer when they check into a Thai Chana application. These questions are about the business compliance with the COVID-19 prevention measures. And these 5 business have a lower score, especially in the market. And why the business with the highest score are a hospital, beauty surgery clinic, and movie production unit. Okay, and the last measure is international movement, including international flight ban since 7th of April. This can reduce the spread of COVID-19 because the international travelers are the major source of new infected cases in Thailand. However, the government allowed Thai or foreigners with some conditions to get into the Thailand, but they need to quarantine for 14 days. There are many state quarantine centers provided by government without a charge, but they can choose alternative state quarantine and pay some service charge started from 30,000 baht to 200,000 baht per course. And this study will show that the increasing of the number of both state quarantine and alternative state quarantine. In June, there were 115 state quarantine centers. Okay, and for the reason of the success of implementing health measures, this will be presented by Dr. Nipon.
Okay, Suresh will open for Q&A. A few questions online would be appreciated. Okay, so probably we can answer a few questions, please.
Yeah. Okay, let's then take a pause and reflect on what has been presented. Any questions? We have about 38 participants right now online. Feel free to ask about the presentation made so far, particularly on the strategies that the government of Thailand put in place. Rarai talked about the contact tracing, health facilities, hygiene, wash issues, mask and social distancing and international movement. It's a set of interventions that are common, but how did it work in Thailand compared to other countries? But that's something that we want to explore further. But we are opening it for question and answer session now. There is one question that has come up. Let me go ahead and ask that Dr. Nipan.
Yes.
This is Ajari. It is from Ajari Rayana Kon. What should be the balance between opening up economy and COVID-19 effective preventive measures? What is the balance? If we shut down
Next session. Next session.
Please go ahead and take that question, please.
Okay. The second session will deal with this issue. This morning, I have been discussing this issue with Ms. Ulailat, but we're going to elaborate this session this question in the next webinar. And my personal feeling is that the Thai government, as well as the middle class who are still employed, they are too afraid to open up the country. And given the fact that Thailand tourism industry accounts for the second largest foreign exchange earning. If we don't open up our country to tourism, there will be a lot of problem for the Thai economy, particularly for the grassroots, lower middle income people who depend heavily on the tourism industry. Yeah, but we're going to answer this question in the second webinar. There's also a question on farmers provided with 5,000 baht for 3 months. All the farmers who register and their family members who did not receive other kind of cash handout from the government will be able to get the money. So altogether, how many farmers received that 10 million farm families receive that money. Yeah. Next webinar, we're going to talk about this in detail.
Okay, so you are going to be talking about the impact of that in the next seminar. But I have a
Yes.
third question from our own Dave Shirley. Were there any action taken either to shut down marketplaces or to reduce congestion in the marketplaces? What happened in the marketplaces?
Yeah.
How did you shut down, or how did you reduce the congestion? Of course, you know, it can be congested, right?
It's
So,
mostly the voluntary what do you call cooperation of the market owners. Many market operators came out and make a reorganization of the market structure. And they check the temperature before you come in, and they make sure that there is social distance. And some traders, some retailers even refuse to sell products to customers who did not wear masks. So this is basically public cooperation.
okay. Okay, wonderful. The last question that is so far we have is from Karun Chanachai. Did you access measures and impact specific to migrant workers and cross-border issues? Can you talk about migrant workers, cross-border issues? What is happening in Thailand on that?
Luckily, there have been no very few reports of infected cases among the migrants. Many migrants are estimated at about 100 to 200,000 went home right after the shutdown of Bangkok. But after that, you did not hear any cases of infected case among the migrants. I have posed this question with my Singaporean colleague and with a medical doctor, epidemiologist. I can't pronounce that one. I have posed this question of why the migrants in Singapore, get infected. So many of them get infected, while in Thailand they are not infected. The answer is that the migrants in Singapore are essential workers who work in the public place like hotel, like services sector, and they have contact with local population, and they live in a large dormitory, closed down dormitory. While in Thailand, most of the migrants they work in the factories, particularly seafood factories, and they don't have much contact with other people, and they live, even though their places, their dormitory is crowded, it's not a big dormitory, it's a small dormitory, and when they get out from their room, it's an open air. So the infection among migrants have been almost nil. We did not hear any report of infected case among the migrants. And right now, the serious concern is we are afraid of the people from Myanmar who are infected, and many of them try to come into Thailand to get job. That's a serious concern at the moment.
Okay, that's about the questions that we have so far.
Suresh, there's a question from
Question.
Okay, let me look at that. Yeah. So it does not come to me on that. Okay, there is I think it's probably a comment from Monudom Yang. I think the effectiveness of containing the pandemic in ASEAN can be somehow attributed to other countries' measures. There is a great positive externality here, I think. What do you think, Dr. Nipan? Is there positive externality? The countries work together, and how did that happen?
I have to look. Frankly speaking, I can't comment on this issue. Let me look at the information. What kind of positive externality, and then I can respond to this comment later. At the moment, I don't have any comment. Okay. You have any comment, Uraila? Any positive, externality?
So there is this question from Dr. Duncan Boughton that you have addressed already. The 5,000 baht for 3 months question has been answered already. So very good. A good set of questions, Dr. Nippon, for you to think about for the next seminar as well.
Yes.
But would you like to continue the presentation?
Yes. Let me continue.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, let me continue. Let me close. Let me. Okay. Okay. So let me try to explain the successfulness of the Thai health policy and institution. I think it's a combination of long-term investment in the preventive public health infrastructure, particularly in rural areas, and institution building with popular support, and it's not decree from the government. I have to emphasize, it's not decree from the government. It's the institution building with popular support. That's basically my short answer. As well as a combination of effective policy measures, particularly the timeliness of the disease surveillance system, the preventive health measure, and public cooperation. It's interesting to note that Thailand did not conduct as many swab tests as Singapore, PCR tests. Singapore conducted tests for all people, all of their people aged 13 and over. At the beginning, something like age 45 years old and over, but now age 13 and over. And in Thailand, we conducted the test, performed the test, PCR test, only less than 1 million people altogether. Okay. So my methodology is to use a qualitative method. And in the near future, we are planning to do a quantitative measurement. Okay, so this is a table. I'm not going to use this table to. I'm not going to explain the whole table. You can look at this table later on. But basically, we try to use institution, culture, public cooperation, disease control management, things like that, or government decree. These are the factors that we look at. So these are the table. So let me go on to explain various health measures. Like the first one is the prompt surveillance response to WHO notification of COVID-19 in China. Okay, the Thai Ministry of Public Health made the surveillance preparation during the New Year holidays. They received the notification from WHO, I think on December 29 or 30. So by December 31st and January the 2nd, they make a preparation during the weekend and establish the emergency operation center, the temperature check at 4 airports on the 3rd of January. This is very important. And then an arriving Chinese tourist had a high temperature on 8th of January. And then on the 13th of January, that particular case is the world's first confirmed COVID-19 infection case outside China. Okay. So then EOC was quickly upgraded to the Prime Minister Operation Center on 24th of January. So very quick response by the Ministry of Public Health. The second issue is the effective, contact tracing, testing, quarantining, and hospitalizing those with severe symptoms. The contact tracing began immediately on 13th of January and enabled the Ministry of Public Health to identify the first local infection on 30th of January. Very important, the contact tracing. Okay, and although people were panicked and many rushed home to their rural home like India, after an announcement of Bangkok lockdown on 26th of March, it did not result in widespread of uncontrollable COVID-19 pandemic in the rural area, because there were, self-quarantine. Those people were self-quarantined at their home and were constantly monitored by a network of 1 million village health volunteers throughout the country. This is very important. Okay. Then, why does Thailand have active surveillance and contact tracing? A surveillance system was first adopted and then adapted from the US CDC system. Okay. Okay. Can Cynthia will answer the question later? Okay. Okay. Surveillance system was first adopted and adapted from the US CDC system, some 20 years ago, as one of and it was set up as one of the division in the Department of Disease Control with regular staff training program. This is very important. The Department of Disease Control has had experience with disease control and contact tracing, a few times in the last 20 years. The first test of the CDC, of the DDC, is the bird flu in 2004. And then the second one is SARS in 2003. Then a strong network of village health volunteers was first established some 40 years ago. I emphasize 40 years ago. And their major role is to be a provision of health information. They become health information service communicator and also a change agent on the health and sanitation behavior, and providing basic health services, including disease surveillance for the government. These are volunteer people. Now, face mask. Remember, face mask is the number one factor among our participants. Many Thais have already used their face mask due to the high levels of pollution, PM 2.5, in the last few years, reaching 95% in April, according to the highest level in ASEAN, according to a survey by YouGov. And teenagers, surprisingly, I talked to my staff, my research staff, they told me that the teenagers have used face masks as fashion, following a group of Korean teenage pop singers. Interesting, already a few years ago. And doctors have already urged patients to wear masks when they are ill. And the indirect impact of mask wearing, this is very important. Indirect impact of mask wearing is a reduction in the incidence of flu. In the first half of 2020, I forgot to show you the graph, but it's very interesting. That's the indirect impact. Okay. Now, voluntary social distancing and work from home. Survey in July showed that 66% of people always practice social distancing in the government office, public places, and public transportation. And official online meetings are legally allowed because online participation can receive a meeting fee. This is one of the incentives. And 40% of workers, widely practice work from home on a rotation basis, as Ms. Ulailat already mentioned. And the reason for widespread compliance with social distancing rule is to avoid hurting other people feeling. This is very important. And then social pressure also. And also because of a successful strategy of the persuasion of CCSA spokesman, a medical doctor, in fact, a psychological doctor, and very handsome guy. Yeah. Okay. Now, both the private and government office as well as business has temperature checking and provide hand washing gel at front door and in the toilet. So 84% of Thai people comply, regularly wash their hands. Eating food, they are recommended to eat hot food without using common spoon. In Thailand, we are used to using a common spoon, but according to CCSA advice, you should not use any common spoon. And then face touching avoidance, almost 60%. What is the reason for high compliance? Personal hygiene is Thai culture. I think personal hygiene is Southeast Asian culture. We used to eat food by using our hand, also Indian people, and the personal hygiene is our culture at all social classes. Hand wash, 2 showers a day, changing clothes after coming home. These are personal hygiene. And the persuasive communication by CCSA as well as media. And I think in Vietnam also, you can observe this kind of pattern. Then mandatory close down of 20 business, and help preventing the spread of COVID-19. Obviously, this is important. But curfew between April to 15th of June using emergency decree, I think it may not be necessary and not cost effective. But the government has the hidden agenda of prohibiting, political protests. They are under pressure from students at the moment. And we found out that only 580 people per day, 0.001 of urban population violated the curfew. Total number is only 41,000 people, during the period of curfew, April to 15th of June. But how much resource they use? They use 17,000 officers at night, and they have to pay these people more than $13 per shift. So a lot of money. And the curfew has serious impact on logistics, transportation, and fresh market. The issue I'm going to talk about in the next webinar. Okay. So, what are the factors behind the success of these health policy measures? It's a combination of long-term investment in preventive public health infrastructure, institution building, professional management with popular support, not decree from above, as I mentioned. The long-term investment in health infrastructure, particularly in rural areas, 50 years of rural public health infrastructure, especially primary health care in rural areas. We have hospitals at the sub-district level in all sub-districts. It's a 40 years of a network building of 1 million village health volunteers. They have been working. One village health volunteer work with 10 families, 10 households. So they know those households very well because they are, one of the villagers in the village, same village. and 20 years of disease control system adopted from the US CDC. Then professional crisis management of CCSA, thanks to the Prime Minister, he delegated authority to the professionally managed Public Health Committee, which employ evidence-based and transparent decision-making process. Every day, they present on 11 o'clock, in the afternoon. The spokesman presented all the evidence, both in Thailand as well as in the world every day. And there is a clear division of power and authority between politicians and bureaucrats. This is a classic case of professional crisis management. And the outcome is promptness, effective, and evidence-based communication. This is very important. Now, trust and public cooperation, the second highest factor among our participants, answer from our participants. Trust and public cooperation with the advice of CCSA and village health volunteer. Trust in CCSA information. One of the most the program at 11 o'clock is one of the most watched TV programs. With a daily update of the situation in Thailand. And the spokesman also offer a COVID-19 situation assessment, politely gave advice and boosted public morale every day. People who went back to their rural home are willing to cooperate with the advice of the village health volunteers. There are some, dispute between the villagers and the village health volunteer, but basically the village health volunteers can do their job very efficiently. Then cultural factor, as I mentioned. And finally, emergency decree and the use of police or military power may not be necessary at all. This is our assessment, and in the future, I hope to be able to do a quantitative measurement of the effectiveness of the policy, and then we can rank, which policy measure is the most important. And now we open up for question. Suresh. So this is a next issue. The second session we focus on economic issue. Okay.
Very good. So let's take the questions. There is a question that has come up. Let me place that question. When you say that 26 businesses were closed down as part of the lockdown, do you mean that were 26 firms or 26 types of businesses?
26 types of business, including school. 20 types of business and social activities, boxing, stadium, things like that. 26 activities. Yeah.
Types of activities.
Type of activities.
Okay. And there is a question about tourism. How tourism industry generates a lot of revenue, as you know, in Thailand, that contributes to national GDP. What are some of the policies that the country has come up with and planning to execute in terms of preparing the opening for tourism? That's a question from Sweta Adhikari. I don't know where she's from, but the name sounds like Nepal. Maybe she's joining from Nepal. Okay, that tourism question, Nepal is also a tourist country, as you know. So there is in that issue. Please go ahead, Dr. Nepan.
Okay, the government had been actively used have been actively promoting domestic tourism. Domestic tourism account for something like 1/4 or 1/5 of total number of tourists in Thailand. But it is not enough. But they've been promoting domestic tourism and all kinds of measures And in fact, the budget used for domestic tourism promotion is the third largest, accounting for something like more than 20,000 baht so far. Okay, they give cash to people to travel. They reimburse. You can say.
Yeah, some measure is about to redeem a hotel charge, or they give a subsidy for a restaurant in the province that you go to travel, something like that.
They even promote, conference, government office who want to hold a conference and seminar in the hotel, or private sector who want to organize a conference and workshop in the hotel. They get some, money back from the cash back from the government. So they do all kind of promotion. And I have emphasized every month there will be a few days of long holiday. The government planned, but the international tourism right now they are planning to have the long stay tourism promotion in October. But those people have to come in for long stay like more than 90 days, because in the first 14 days, they have to be quarantined. Okay, so but they haven't gone as far as more proactive international tourism. They are too afraid, and we are still arguing about these issues.
Okay. Thank you. That was very useful answer, Dr. Nipan. Now we have this related question to this 26 firms that were closed down, type of firms that were closed down. What do you think, roughly an estimate of how much GDP was of the country that these 26 types of businesses account for? Due to close down, how much loss probably you met with? Is there any estimate of that?
There, probably next webinar will present the detailed information. The business that were mostly seriously affected, Ulaila is looking at the data. Overall GDP is estimated to be reduced this year by 8%. And the sector that is most seriously affected is accommodation and food service, transport sector, and art, entertainment, recreation. Obviously, recreation, boxing, stadium, theaters are closed down. So the GDP on the second quarter is reduced by something like minus 46%. This is one of the examples. Okay.
Okay. So you are going to be talking more about that in the next seminar. So we look forward to that. We look forward to that as well. But let me see if there are any other final questions that people would like to raise. Yeah. Okay. So those are the questions. There are a lot of questions that have come up, particularly given that this is a broad policy response talk that you have given, and it is very revealing for us, how Thailand effectively addressed that nicely, and it's a good lesson that we can learn, given that you have from village level organization as village extension, the health volunteers, up to the national level, fully involved, fully, the public cooperating with them, and so on. So it's a very effective show of how to respond to a pandemic. But there is another question that has come up. Let me ask that question. It's coming from Orachos Nabat Singhuang. Any evidences to show more health concern behaviors that will persist in the long run? Do we have any evidences that the behaviors of people related to health behavior that will persist for a long time? If I understand that question, maybe it is will people go back dropping the mask and then start, mingling up and so on? Or how do you look that as a long-term kind of prospect?
Let me medium term first.
Yeah, okay.
Not long term. Tomorrow there will be a big political protest among the students, and we expect tens of thousands of students to protest against the government. And this is I think the Prime Minister last night appeared on television and he is warning people, but it's also political, but that's also a worrying sign, because many people who have been infected are asymptomatic, and we don't know how many asymptomatic cases in Thailand, and that's one of the weakness of not having a large number of tests. So we can't estimate the actual number of asymptomatic cases. The fact that there is no new infection case, there is one case on September 3rd, but after that, since then, there is no local infection. The fact that there is no local infection doesn't mean that there is no problem. There are still problems. And that's why the Ministry of Public Health, the CCSA, still keep warning people that don't let your guard down. You have to wear a mask, you have to wash your hand, things like that. They still warn we should. Another concern is the smuggling of migrants, particularly from Myanmar into Thailand. And in fact, there were even Chinese migrants who live in Myanmar, and they were afraid of being infected in Myanmar. So they were illegally, smuggled. They illegally smuggled into Thailand. So that's, I think, that's the case that we are worrying. So right now, they try to tighten the security at the border, but it's very difficult to tighten the long land border. Very difficult.
Sure. Now, there are a couple of more questions. One follow-up questions from Dr. Arochos is, are there possibilities of new industries that will emerge after COVID-19? Is there potentials for emergence of new industries because of COVID-19?
Obviously, you can find that, farmers, many people, particularly farmers, they begin to sell online, and in the village, the teenagers, the young people who still live in the village or came back to the village, they begin to launch online sale of the village products, and that's one of the good news, light at the end of the tunnel, but still very limited. Okay. And there are also new business in about health products in Thailand.
Correct. Okay, there are potentials and opportunities there too. Okay, for another question from Dr. Ben Belton coming from Myanmar. Some other ASEAN countries with less strong institutions than Thailand also seems to have quite low COVID-19 infection. Any thoughts on why that might be the case? So there are other ASEAN countries where the infection rate is low, but also they don't have very strong institutions as Thailand, as you described. What is happening there? Do you know?
A few hypotheses. Okay, which has not been proven, but probably the most reasonable explanation is that if you look at Laos or Cambodia, they are not very much open like Thailand and Singapore. Thailand and Singapore is the most open country. And Thailand has the largest number of tourism in this region, and Laos, Cambodia, or even Myanmar, don't have many tourists visiting their country. And there are also another hypothesis, among the people in health in academy. They talk about the batch in Southeast Asia, living in Southeast Asia, and probably people in Southeast Asia has developed immunology resistant to SARS-CoV-2 already, but whether that is true or not has to be proven. I know that there is also another hypothesis by Mr. Heng Samrin from Cambodia, about the blood type of people in Southeast Asia, but that one I don't believe in that kind of hypothesis. There are few hypotheses. Those hypotheses has to be proven.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Nipan, for very nice answers to the questions that are coming up, and that gives us opportunity also to talk about the next seminar that is coming up. That is September 30th. We will be sending the links and also to see how best we can spread this news to other Asian countries that are not participating this time. But we are looking forward to that, where we will talk about the impact specifically on economic impact and as well as agricultural impact, which is more relevant for the project itself. But we will make sure that we will get policy analysts and policy makers and policy advisors attending that from Thailand's experience, to learn from Thailand's experience as well. We are pretty much coming to a close of this webinar for today. I don't see any new questions coming up, but I would like to leave it to you, Dr. Nipan, to say last few words about what we are expecting for the next seminar that you have planned for, and then we'll close the webinar today after that. Dr. Nipan.
Well, as I said, we'll be presenting mostly the economic measures for response of the government on economic measures, and you will see that in the next webinar that our economic response, aside from the cash handout, the government has been providing a lot of money, almost 500 billion baht already, almost 500 billion baht already, and that has been able to mitigate the short-term burden on the middle class, and particularly poor people and lower middle income class. But the medium-term prospect on the Thai business and employment status of those people are not very good at the moment, and I haven't seen any good policy at the moment. We'll talk about these issues in the next webinar. That's my concern, my serious concern.
Thank you.
Because the amount of budget we use to stimulate the economy and use for this case is the largest budget in our modern history of economic policy. Huge budget, on 1.9 trillion baht, 17% of GDP. Very large amount, and in fact it's higher than that. So I'm worrying about the medium term and prospect.
Thank you, Dr. Nipan. That was wonderful, giving some flavor to what is coming up in a couple of weeks in the next seminar, webinar. We will be sending the links again to the participants, as well as we will be expanding the participants next time. Um,
Before I forgot, we'll send the question to the participant and please answer the question. But it's the same question, but this time we ask you to rank the question, and then please send the answer to us by Monday next week. Next 2 days, next 3 days, please.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nipan. You are also using this opportunity to get the feedback from the participants to see what is happening in those areas. So that is very good. So with that, let me thank you, Dr. Nipan Uraret, for presenting a very nice webinar. And let me thank Professor David Shirley from Michigan State joining us, and others who have joined from Asia and the US, and also finally, but not least, Jim for effectively handling the technological aspect of it. So I see Professor Shirley coming on. Dave, do you want to say anything?
No, just thank you. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you on the 30th. Didn't really need to say anything.
Wonderful. Thanks again, colleagues from TDRI and KESASAT. Thanks for helping to organize this. So thank you so much. Bye-bye now.